All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this third presentation in the Adulting 101 series presented by the graduates of the last decade or Gold Board. Tonight, we have an excellent presentation from two very accomplished alumni with nearly 30 years of combined experience in the field of human resources, Jorge Diaz and James Dunford. I apologize. Jorge is an involved member of our National Alumni Advisory Board and has held a number of leadership roles in human resources around the Chicagoland area over the last 20 years. And James has been working in human resources since graduating Loyola in 2012 and has been a committee chair on our Gold Board for the last year and has been an involved member for the last 2 years. So we have a little bit of young alumni representation with us this evening. Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping discussion items. At the bottom of your screen, you will find a Q&A button. After James and Jorge's presentation, we will be doing a question and answer. So go ahead and submit your questions in there. You don't have to wait until the Q&A portion. So if something strikes you in the middle of the presentation, submit it as soon as it comes to you, and we will get to them in that part of the presentation. Additionally, this is being recorded, and a recorded version of this will be sent out to all registrants in the thank you email. So if you missed something or there's some information that you'd like to have on hand for the future, you will be able to have that no problem. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jorge and James. Thanks.
All right, fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you again for signing up for this session. We're both super excited to connect with all of you. We appreciate all of your interest in learning more about human resources or HR, and love to sort of go through some content and materials with you. And as Jeremiah said, we'd love to definitely field any question. I like to say, there's no such thing as a silly question, only a question that goes unasked. And sort of especially now, given everything in the world, it's really important to understand what HR is as you all start and sort of continue in your careers at your respective sort of points. So super excited to dive right in with you. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. So we wanted to share this quote with you. I think it's a good way to sort of thinking about human resources as a whole. This is from Steve Wen, the CEO of the Wynn Resorts Limited. Human resources isn't a thing we do, it's the thing that runs our business. So one of the reasons why I personally love HR is because HR is constantly changing. And because businesses are constantly changing. If you think about sort of like the history of HR, it used to be, going from sort of like the personnel office to being sort of HR. Now we're sort of really expanding into really being about people and people operations. So you may see a couple different terms, as you go and start your career and sort of work with different members who are in an HR capacity. At a high level, HR is a group at most organizations that are responsible for managing the employee life cycle. So when we say that, we mean essentially the beginning to the end of someone's employment at a particular company. So it could be in terms of recruiting. So it could be the people who are reaching out to you on LinkedIn, people who are having a phone screen with you, people who are reviewing your job application in an application system, people who are at a job fair, people who are doing a virtual interview with you. The people who are making the hire, so the people who may be extending you an offer, people who may be negotiating a salary or other benefits or compensation with. They're going to play a role in your onboarding at an organization, right? So they'll be potentially the people who are first connecting with you when you first go into your job on your first day. They could be, coordinating where to sort of drop off your equipment, as a lot of companies are starting now virtually. We also play a big role in training as well, and we really share that with the rest of the organization. So doing a lot of both sort of in-person, but then also virtual training as well. And then we also play a role in the offboarding, which is the exiting of employees from a company. So if you decide to resign from a particular company and go on to a new role, you may be doing an exit interview with a member of the HR team. Essentially, we're really helping a business achieve their future strategic and tactical goals. Again, both in terms of those items that I mentioned, but then also thinking for the future and how companies will continue to adapt to the change, and really thinking about, as talent is one of the most important assets that a company has, how to really manage that talent and ensure that as they go into the future, as industry continues to change, as the world continues to change, we help them prepare for that future. As you can imagine, this has been a crazy year for all of us, and on the HR side, it's definitely been really crazy. We've had to adapt and really help our business partners really start to understand, sort of what is going on. What are we doing in terms of office closures, policies, remote work from home policies, things of that nature. So that's sort of why I love HR, because again, it's sort of constantly changing. We also play a role in administering employee benefits and what that means, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We also play a role in setting employment policies and procedures. As I mentioned, we've had to come up with a lot of different policies, and a lot of HR partners have had to do that because of COVID, because of working from home. So we're sort of the people who really help the business set those policies and procedures, and then also ensure that employees understand them, they feel empowered by those policies, and that they're ultimately following them as well. We also play a role in coordinating employee time off, which is part of a lot of policies and benefits plans at a particular organization. We also handle leave of absences as well. This is by no means a comprehensive list. There's a lot of other parts and components of what HR does. HR is essentially, also based on the size of a company and what the particular company industry is as well. So depending on the size of the company, you may have a couple of HR journalists or points of contact there, but there could also be larger teams as well. You could have teams of just with recruiters, or recruitment could be part of a general HR manager's responsibility, again, depending on the size and the scope of that company. Okay. All right, so diving into benefits. So when I say employee benefits, it's part of sort of what I like to call sort of a total rewards package for employees. Essentially, it's a form of additional compensation that an employer pays or gives to employees that's considered something that's above and beyond their sort of regular salary or wages that they receive for a particular position. Not all positions may have benefits. Not all companies may have the same type of benefit plan. Again, it really depends on the specific company, the specific size, and the specific industry. Employee benefits to that extent can come in a lot of different forms. And it's a really important thing to think about, as you're potentially choosing a new company to work for, really understanding what those specific employee benefits plans are. Sort of as you think about sort of your next step in your career, what's going to be important to you in your next role? Like, is it compensation? Is it having a certain kind of health insurance? Is it maybe having a tuition reimbursement program? Is it having an employee assistance program? These are all things that sort of go into the calculus of a candidate trying to select a new role, and benefits are often something that sort of incentivize potential employees to join a company. To that end, it's really important for you as potential candidates, but then also as employees, to really understand the total offering of benefits that are offered by your company. And HR can play a sort of a huge role in helping you understand that. Some typical benefits plans that could be offered most frequently will include some kind of health insurance plan. Within that, there could be different plans such as an HMO or a PPO plan. Dental insurance, vision insurance. A company could have the option for you to contribute to a 401k, which is a super important type of sort of retirement planning. Some companies may also offer equity or options as an additional sort of incentive for you to join that company as you start to plan for retirement one day. Companies could also offer long-term or short-term disability, and also say that some companies also offer a life insurance plan as well. And then paid time off is also a part of that total benefits offering. So these are all different things to be aware of, as you're a candidate and you're looking at potential companies to work for, but then also for the current companies that you may work for too, really making sure that you understand the total offering of benefits offered by that particular company. We can go to the next one. Okay, so as I mentioned, time off is a part of the benefits plan offered by a lot of companies. Again, the specific time off sort of policy and procedures will vary depending on the company. It's a super important thing to be aware of before you actually start in a new role, just so that you can be aware of how much time off is typically offered by a company. When you may frequently hear PTO or paid time off, meaning that you can take time off and the company will pay for it. So again, specifically, this is another form of compensation for you, and something to think about as you consider joining a potential company. Some companies will offer different kinds of PTO or time off. It could include sick leave. It could also include vacation time or personal time. Most companies will have some kind of paid holidays as well, typically, around a dozen or so, just sort of depending again on that specific company. It also offers sick leave as well as maternity and paternity leave. Again, these are all important things to think about before you consider joining a company. Just some sort of general best practices about time off to be aware of. Time off always needs to be planned. As HR, we definitely recommend employees to plan time off as far in advance as possible so that your manager can think about coverage if need be. And then, like I said, every company has a different time off policy, again, depending on their size and scope. And the reason why companies have paid time off is because it's really important for employees to have that work-life balance. Most companies, I think, would agree that that's important to having productive, successful employees. So they definitely encourage you to take time off. But as HR professionals, I would encourage you to really understand the sort of scope and parameters of your company's particular time off policy. The next slide. Learning and development. So learning and development, or L&D, is also another part of the overall HR function. You may hear it be referred to as training and development, or just training, depending on your particular company. Why a company would offer learning and development is that they believe in keeping employees engaged and successful in their particular role. It is something that is offered for you to continue to expand your skill sets. And it also helps the company plan for the future as well. In general, it costs a lot to time, resources to bring on new employees and to hire them. So by investing in employees, by providing learning and development, it really allows the employees to grow, be engaged, and ultimately have a long-term career at the company. So sort of a win-win for both the employee and the company. And I think that, again, a lot of people sort of in my sort of general age frame, both millennials and Gen Zs, this is something that I think is really important to a lot of us as we think about companies to work for. Having a really robust learning and development program will indicate that a company really has a true investment in its employees. So like I said, sort of L&D helps ensure that employees have the necessary skill sets to be successful at their jobs. It can help a company if they're going to be going through some kind of change, for the company that employees have those necessary hard skills in order for the company to grow, if there's some kind of new software or program that they're going to be rolling out. And it can also be both in person, a lot of virtual, but then also self-paced as well. A lot of companies will have some kind of learning management system that allows you to take trainings both during your initial onboarding, but then also ongoing trainings as you continue to grow in your career at a company. Perfect, and we can go to the next one. Awesome.
All right, I'm going to take over here. Thanks, James. Again, hello, everybody. Jorge Diaz here, and I'm going to talk about a few additional areas of HR that I'm going to go relatively quickly through these points as James did, and then what we can do is when we gather up at the end here and answer some of your questions. I know that it looks like there's at least one, but I'm sure they'll be gathering along the way. If you have them, we definitely want to hear them. So let's start with performance management. This may not be a term. This may be a term that you're not familiar with. So when I say performance management, most HR professionals think of this as the system that sort of governs the performance review process. Everything that the company does to evaluate performance for employees is typically covered under this performance management structure. And what I would recommend to any professional is it's really on you to understand the process, the forms, the cadence. Is it a once-a-year performance review? Is it a mid-year and an end-of-year? Is it a quarterly thing? Understanding how often you're going to be sitting down and reviewing performance formally with your manager. What's the rating scale? Is it a 3-point scale? Is it a 5-point scale? And what are the definitions? If there is an exceptional rating or a 5 out of 5, is that like someone who's consistently exceeding their performance goals, or are there specifics that you need to understand in that definition so you can get a sense of, are you a meets expectation, or are you less than that or above that, depending on the review with your manager. Second point, proactively manage the process. And here's what I mean by that. Whatever company you get to, I assure you, there will be managers that are really good at managing the performance process, and there will be managers that are really bad at managing the performance process. And that means that some managers, they're failing to schedule time with you to do the performance review discussion. They may not be thorough in the process. And here's the deal. It affects you more than it affects them. And so understanding enough about that process that you can be proactively managing it, including if your manager hasn't set up time and you know that it's performance review time, following up with them and saying, hey, can we schedule that? When are you going to schedule that? Just being on top of it will help you. Most of these processes have a self-evaluation. So managers does their review, but the first part of it is employee does their self-review. Here's the recommendation on that. It's really important that you're balanced in that process. Showing a lot of effort or talking about a lot of effort, but really not talking about the results isn't going to get you very far. Effort is great, results matter more. So if you know that you really killed it on some project, you really spent a lot of hours working on it, a lot of weekends and evenings or whatever, talk about that, but also talk about the results that you got from that, because that's going to be the most important piece. And being reflective of yourself and understanding where you have opportunities to improve is going to be an important part of that conversation. And the more senior you get in any company, the more that skill becomes important. You get to an interview for a director or senior director or manager, or VP or anything above that. In that interview process, they're going to ask you to be pretty self-reflective about your opportunities to grow. If you didn't develop that skill of being reflective of yourself along the way, it's probably going to hurt your chances going forward. And then last, manage your expectations relative to your results and to others, and also relative to those definitions. If there's a rating that says exceptional and it says exceeded on every goal, and you know for a fact that you did not exceed on every goal, then you shouldn't be arguing with your manager when you didn't get an exceptional rating. The other thing is, if you work on a team and you know that and the performance of that team is pretty visible, let's say it's a sales team and you know its results are being somehow demonstrated on some kind of a dashboard, and you know you're not at the top of that list, then you shouldn't expect a top rating in that group. Relative to the definition, relative to your own results and goals that were set, is important understanding, and you should understand that perspective. A lot of people come in and they just expect the top rating because they just want that because it feels good, but they didn't always earn it, and you should be realistic about that. Next slide. All right, money, money, money. Total rewards on the money side per James Common. Typically, total rewards, we think of compensation and benefits together. The compensation piece is what people generally think about is, how are you going to pay me? Base salary, is there a commission or a variable pay, and so on. Some companies are really transparent about their pay structures. Some companies are not. What I would encourage you to do, whatever company you're at or whatever company you're looking at, is understand what you can that's available. Is there a salary band system or salary grade system? And what levels are they, and what is your level? And what are your opportunities to grow in that? What are the policies around merit pay? Is there an annual review cycle that you might expect a raise every year? Are you eligible for overtime if you work more than a certain amount of hours? Those are all things you should understand pretty regularly. Salary versus non-exempt or hourly is a concept that most HR professionals understand, but not everybody understands this. The government has rules. Some states have specific rules beyond the federal government, but the reality is if you're in a non-exempt or in an hourly position, you're supposed to be paid overtime if you work more than 40 hours. If you're in a salaried or exempt position, then you work the hours necessary to get the job done. The company doesn't owe you any compensation on top of that if you work more hours. Understanding what level you're at and what the rules are that is going to be really important. And it really is defined by the government rules. It's not by the company. So if the company tells you that you're eligible for overtime and you think you should be considered salaried, that's great that you think that, but it's typically driven by some legal definitions based on what the government rules have been, and they change from time to time. Let's talk about market evaluations. So most companies guide their process of developing pay using some form of a market evaluation. They sign up with a company that specializes in that aggregates data from various companies, typically in similar or relevant industries and geographies, and they use that to make pay decisions. Some companies develop a range, some companies develop a band system, some companies just have the data available in case they need to check against the market. Either way, if your company has that, there's a pretty specific methodology, and you may not necessarily know about that. It's probably a good thing to ask some of the HR professionals on what they do to make sure that they're staying competitive with the market. But it is how pay is typically determined. One thing that I would caution you on in looking at pay for yourself is a lot of times employees will take a look at something like salary.com or some kind of free online wizard and print out the page and show it to the manager. Hey, you should be paying me $20,000 more. The reality is those systems that are free lack some basic methodology that would apply relevance to your particular role, function, or industry. It doesn't mean that it's not based on some data. It just means that it's probably not based on the right data. So using that as an argument to try and get a raise may not necessarily be the strongest thing. However, having a sense for your own relative pay in the marketplace is an important thing, and you should pay attention to what your pay looks like, how it grows. If you know that there are peers in other companies and have a sense for how those companies pay, it's a good thing to pay attention to. Understanding your value and asserting yourself, it's certainly always hard for an HR professional to have to respond to those questions, especially when someone thinks they're underpaid. But it's an important thing that you're able to assert yourself and, one, have those conversations with your manager, but it should be realistic. You shouldn't come in your first year thinking, hey, I'm going to get a huge raise after having done nothing and the company's still training you to get you productive. These are the kinds of self-expectations that will help you manage those salary conversations later. But if you're killing it and you're at the top of the leaderboard on results and you feel like your pay is not where it needs to be, have that conversation. Sometimes you're just going to get an education out of it. Sometimes you're actually starting to plant a seed that might result in something down the road. Next slide. All right, talent management. Chances are you haven't really heard of this term too much. Let me try and tell you how I think about it. I think of talent management as the way the company manages the talent in the organization for the company's benefit. I think of you managing your own career as your own career management. But when I think of the company has all kinds of things that it's concerned about with its talent. And that's trying to figure out who's going to fill what roles. Do we have enough of a bench? If someone leaves, what are we going to do? All of those kinds of things. And so some of them have formal processes, some of them have informal processes, but typically the reality is somewhere in the management ranks, people are talking about you behind your back. Someone's saying, hey, that person's great, they got great potential, we see them growing in their role, we think they have to work on this. You may not necessarily be privy to those discussions, but these processes are set up to kind of establish those conversations at some level of leadership, where we are talking about, hey, here's someone that's showing really great signs of potential. We think we should invest in them a little bit more. We probably have to develop a development plan that helps them grow and give them some exposure. Maybe we'll assign them to a project that will be able to show if they're ready for the next level. Those are things that happen as a result of talent management. And typically it's a reflection of where you land on the scale of performance versus potential. High potential, high performance is going to get you the best opportunities in an organization. High performance, but you're kind of not showing a potential above that level is going to probably get you rewarded and reflected well, but not at the level of someone who's higher potential. Low performance, high potential means you're just not trying hard enough, and chances are that's not going to get you very well along either. Succession planning. So here's the thing. The reason these programs exist is so that we're ready when key roles leave, that we have a sense for who can fill that role. You start with typically executive roles, but in a lot of organizations, you start going levels deep into the organization so that if someone wins the lottery and leaves unexpectedly, or if they take another job, or if they quit, that someone's ready and being sort of prepped and developed as a potential successor. That's the process that keeps the organization's continuity going. And you should understand that, because as you want to grow, you should understand what kind of roles you can compete for down the road. And you should understand that that's a long-term planning cycle, so that you're developing and having those conversations with your manager about your development plan, what you can work on, where you can grow, what your interests are, what your mobility is. How are you willing to relocate? Are you willing to take an international assignment? Those are all things that are part of this succession planning and development planning process that companies will think about in talent management. Next slide. All right, so engaging with HR. So this is something that I think it's really important that you understand. And not everybody, people sometimes are a little scared of HR. They think that HR is the people that you shouldn't go talk to, or there's a problem, or that's who's going to be involved if you get fired, or whatever. Let me just make a few points. So let's start off with, not all HR is the same. So to James's start, there's all kinds of roles in HR. The person who recruited you has a very different skill set than the person you go to when you got an issue within the company, or than the person you go to when you have questions about your benefits. There's all kinds of roles, and so understanding who you can go to is an important part of that process. Chances are most companies have some kind of a representative, a generalist, or a business partner that is assigned to your location or to your function that is your go-to person. And chances are that person will hopefully be available, be proactive, be listed on some website somewhere that shows, hey, this is your go-to person. If they're good, then they're getting out in front of you as you start and saying, hey, contact me, I can help you. I can have conversations with you. I can, we can discuss your career plans, those kinds of things. That typically is intended to be a resource for you and the rest of your team and your management team as well. Here's some additional guidance in sort of working with HR professionals within a company. One, you should understand all the self-service options and where resources are located. If you're that person that has to call someone to find out where something that's like three pages into the benefits handbook can be easily found by a quick search online in your intranet, then that's not necessarily gonna help you, because chances are you gotta wait for someone to get back to you, give you the answer when you probably could have found it yourself. Most companies have some kind of a self-service program where you can find some of these answers really quickly by yourself. And of course, if you don't have the ability to do that, then of course ask questions, but just understand that there's probably resources that are available to you. Who can help with benefits and other specific questions? That's typically, some companies will have a benefits department, some companies will have some kind of a service center. Sometimes, your generalist or business partner or HR manager, the person that's assigned to your group, can guide you, or sometimes they might have the answer themselves, but chances are there's a number of resources where you can get that information. When you have a problem, who do you go to? So when you're concerned and you have no one else to talk to, you want to talk, you're having problems with your manager, you feel like there's something going on in the company that's not right. Typically there's a lot of resources, from like ethics hotline resources, where you can kind of follow under like whistleblowing type of options, all the way to just contacting and having a confidential conversation with your HR manager or HR representative that's assigned to your group. It's important that you understand that that person is there for the team. And, there's probably a lot that's written about that, like you shouldn't trust HR, or that HR is only there to help the company. Here's the reality. HR is there to make sure that the company is operating effectively and well and fairly and legally. And so they are there to help the company, but they're there to help the company do the right things. And so if you got a problem with a manager because a manager is being unfair or potentially discriminatory, having that conversation with that HR representative is important. Just understand that they're not all the same. So I wouldn't go to a recruiter, because a recruiter is not trained to handle those kinds of issues, but your typical HR business partner, generalist, or HR manager is typically the kind of person who's trained on handling difficult and sensitive situations. But you have to understand when you go into that conversation what their capability is from a confidentiality perspective. Going in and saying, hey, I'd like this to keep this between us. The vast majority of HR professionals will honor that. That is a staple in the HR industry of maintaining confidentiality. However, if you proceed to tell them about something that could be considered illegal or against the company's code of conduct, like you share something that's discriminatory or racial or sexual harassment, then that, just like mandated reporters, a lot of times that HR professional is really responsible to take steps to pursue and investigate that further within the organization. They, chances are, will tell you, say, hey, I'm going to stop you right now. I just need you to know that I'm going to have to take some steps here. So although I appreciate that you don't want this going any further, I need you to know that I have a responsibility and a duty to act on behalf of the company. We'll keep it as confidential as we can, but you should know I need to take some steps to investigate that so we can address that issue that you're raising. So that's kind of high level. We really just scratched the surface here on these issues, but certainly wanted to make sure that you have a good sense of working with HR as a professional. So I think with that, we'll go to the group discussion, Jeremiah, and then we'll take the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to you both. That was a lot of excellent information. And I know, you answered some questions that I've had for my HR generalist, several times. So thank you so much for that. As I mentioned before, at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. We have had a few questions come in, so we'll go ahead and get started on those, as well as some pre-submitted questions. But if in this discussion anything pops up, feel free to put it there, and we will do our best to get to it. So the first one, is it appropriate to contact HR asking about a company's benefits prior to applying for a position?
James, you want to take that out?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would say this, companies that have robust benefits plans like that will have it posted. They'll have it on their website. They'll have it as part of, under like a benefit section, under a total reward section. I think that it's something also too to think about. So they will have something like that posted. In terms of asking for it, it definitely is a great idea. Like when you have that initial screen with a recruiter to, ask them specific questions about benefits. I think too, like they will be able to sort of talk through that sort of at a high level. The other thing too to think about, like with tuition reimbursement specifically, to also understand too, like what the specific role that you're applying for is and what the company culture is like, and I say that just as not that it's a flag or anything like that, but it could be something where like, if it is not a typical sort of 9-to-5 role, like, that is that like necessarily like the sort of first thing that you should be asking. And again, it's not necessarily a cut, cut and dry sort of manner, but it is just sort of something to think about. But I'd say like the easy answer is that something like that will be posted like on a company's website, but definitely feel free to ask the recruiter during the process and they can walk you through that in more detail.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think the recruiter typically will know some of that information. I agree that some of the resources are available. I think when you get into the management discussion, they may not be the expert on benefits, even though they're hiring for the role. So I wouldn't ask it there necessarily until you get, maybe further in the process if it's clear that you're going to get a job offer. The other thing, just in terms of asking questions about like benefits and your compensation, is it's probably a good rule of thumb to let the company really want you and be interested in you, before you start getting too deep into some of those conversations. Sometimes if you're in the first conversation and you're asking about how much time off you get, they might be thinking about, okay, so you're more interested in the time off than you are about coming to work. And that may not be your perspective on doing that, but it's important to let them see you for who you are before you understand kind of all the perks and benefits of the job as well.
Staying in that, on that benefits topic really quick, a lot of times with startups and things like that, some companies offer really intriguing benefits. Some companies will pay for social sports leagues. They have flexible working hours, or they offer specific learning and development opportunities. If you notice that a friend or someone that know's company has something intriguing like that, how would you go about broaching that conversation? Is it possible? Do companies typically have some flexibility in those benefits that they can offer? And if so, how would you bring that up?
So I'll take that one first. So I'd say the vast majority of things that we add is because of employee commentary. So either because we're asking, like on a survey, we do a regular engagement pulse process. And so sometimes, just hearing constant commentary on something that people would like to see enhanced or get better And so you learn through that. And so typically companies respond to that. If it's a competitive dynamic of retaining employees, the company wants to do its best to retain employees and be competitive in the marketplace. And so chances are someone's looking at what other companies are doing, but hearing the voice of employees is really important. So I would encourage you to be active in any surveys you get, but don't be afraid to tell your HR manager, say, hey, I'm interested in this. Do you think that might be coming along? Because they'll feed that back to like corporate benefits and so on and say, hey, we're getting a lot of questions about tuition or whatever, and that helps the company plan and prioritize as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely recommend speaking out about that, requesting it. There's an expression about sort of companies having to sort of fight for talent and the war on talent. My thought is that like the war is over and talent won. Like companies are really having to fight for talent, especially now. So they really want ways to distinguish themselves in the marketplace to potential candidates and to top talent ultimately. So they definitely want to hear, and we want to hear ways of innovative ways to sort of think outside the box. I work at a startup now, and that's always something that's sort of top of mind for us. How do we take that to the next level? How do we really attract candidates in a very competitive market?
Absolutely. And kind of wrapping up this benefits conversation, a lot of times companies will offer a variety of benefits when it comes to healthcare packages, dental plans, retirement, things like that. How would someone know what benefits are right for them? Is that a conversation that they're able to have with their HR professionals? And how do they ensure, how do they go about enrolling, and how do they ensure that they're getting all of the benefits that they're entitled to?
Sure, I can take that one. So again, during the recruitment process, information about like benefits will be presented in terms of what healthcare plans are available. Ultimately, your healthcare, whether it's mental or medical or dental insurance, that's something for you and for you to determine with your specific doctor or with your specific dentist. It is a good idea to ask, like, if you do have a particular doctor or you do have a particular dentist, to ensure that the insurance plan that's offered by the company has those particular individuals within network. So that is something to sort of ask your HR person or your during the recruitment process. Ultimately, we in HR obviously have to respect, sort of confidentiality and sort of sensitivity around that. And so, but ultimately, sort of the onus is on the employee to sort of figure out, okay, what sort of kind of doctors or what kind of medical support do I need, and does this company's particular plan have my doctor or my specialist within network in their particular medical plan. Also, too, knowing that companies, like I said, could offer an HMO versus PPO plan, and what are the differences between that? An HMO plan means you typically have to go to one primary care physician or doctor before you get a referral to go to another specialist, whereas a PPO has a much sort of wider network. So these are all good things to sort of be thinking about, as you're looking at a potential company, and sort of, if whether you're talking to a recruiter or when you're getting to the sort of the offer stage, to really understand all that before you ultimately make a decision.
Absolutely. So let's transition now, talking to that recruiter, getting that job at the company. What would be your best recommendations for negotiation of benefits? We had a question come in beforehand about what is there typically some flexibility in PTO? We also have had a question come in tonight about negotiating salary up front. What opportunities does an employee or a potential employee have in those negotiations, and what recommendations would you say to our audience to get the most out of those conversations?
So I'll comment on that. So here's the thing. When you're at the offer stage, it means they want you. So nothing can hurt in asking for something. You just have to kind of manage your own expectations around what's realistic and what's not. And sometimes you don't know until you ask the question, because they'll tell you, oh, we're super structured. This is like a set amount. We're not going to pay more than that, and so you'll get those answers in that question. But sometimes just by asking, it means the question gets rattled up, and all of a sudden you find yourself an extra week of vacation, or some extra a couple $1,000s on salary or whatever. Having a good understanding on your market value is important, because it gives you that confidence that you need. in that area, knowing that you had something at a prior company that on a company that you're thinking about leaving to go to this new job, and knowing that they're not offering that makes them want to have to make up for that. So like if they have, say, hey, look, my company has this, doesn't sound like you have that. Can we, I'd like to ask for more money, more salary because of that difference, is a very reasonable conversation. And the worst that can happen is no. And you just have to make the assessment on whether you're going to take the job or not. But I would encourage you to be assertive, of course, in the right way, not super demanding. You always have to kind of find diplomacy in that process of asking those questions. But if you don't ask, it's definitely not going to happen naturally sometimes. So it's best to assert yourself and ask.
Definitely. And I'd say, way even before like you get to that point, I think it's also important for you as you're thinking about a new role is like, what are your primary motivators too? Are you starting your career? Are you looking to transition to a different industry? You're looking to transition to a different field or what have you? Is this a lateral move for you if you're moving to another company? So what's motivating you? And if compensation truly is, and you feel like you've done sort of research again, sort of with the caveat that Jorge mentioned, or is it a more robust benefits package? Is it more time off? Sort of being aware of sort of what is important to you before you even, I'd say even before you submit an application, but definitely before you get to that offer point is definitely helpful, because sometimes it can be intimidating to have that conversation, and it can be awkward to sort of, I guess sort of be assertive and practice self-advocacy while also being respectful and diplomatic. So having that sort of firm sense for yourself before you even go into that conversation is also really helpful and important as well.
Absolutely. I think that transitions really well into our next question, that idea of self-advocacy and knowing where to draw the line with your work. Someone posted in our questions, exempt versus non-exempt employees. With the idea of a salary employee, there may be expectations that you're working more than 40 hours a week. How do you ensure, from a human resources perspective and from an employee perspective, how do you ensure that you're being adequately compensated, and how do you advocate for yourself if you feel that the expectations are not in line with what you were hoping for the job, or kind of what you felt was put forth to you when you took the position?
So there's a lot there to try and respond to that, because let's just start with the whole salary versus exempt thing. It's important. I think more companies are aware these days of the importance of sort of full wellness, people's balance in their time and day, especially in COVID era where a lot of people are working from home and having trouble kind of by defining when the end of the day is and so on. I think that there's a lot of companies that are really kind of much more sensitive to it than when I came out of college, for example. But to balance that, so I think if your company is asking you to do too much all the time, I think you have to assess how much difference is that between what they're asking you to do versus what you're actually just doing. Because what happens is a lot of times people complain about their workload just because they're signing up for way too much. And there's that discretionary piece of going after more because they want to be involved in this project and that project, and then they feel overwhelmed. It's not really the company that's asked them or tasked them with too much. And so those are the kinds of things you have to try and figure out. But if you know that you're bringing value to the table, then I think that that's when the opportunity is to advocate for yourself in your pay. But you also have to be reasonable. And so what I would encourage people to do is think about it from an employer perspective before you ever think about it from yourself perspective, because that'll give you some balance in the way you're thinking about it. If you just took the job and you're a few months in and now you're going to complain about your pay, you just took the job. Like renegotiating your pay when you just took the job doesn't make sense. If you come to me as as the head of HR for my company, I'm going to be like, well, you could have negotiated that then, and or you could have not taken the job if you thought it was not the right pay. Those are the kinds of things that you just have to kind of have some perspective in making the decision. Having said that, if you know that there's a value gap and you know that you're kind of on the high end of that value piece and the company's really kind of not paying enough for that, just approaching that with your manager saying, hey, look, I really don't feel like I'm getting paid for the level of value that I'm contributing to the company. Here are some of the examples. Here's some of the output that I have. I really want to stay with the company, because you never want it to be a threat. you want it to be that you're thinking about it. Because the opportunity to walk and go somewhere else for another pay is always an opportunity that your manager is going to be thinking about, especially if you're not happy with pay. So they're going to try and figure out what's within their power. And if they think you're really, if they believe you and agree with you that your value is at that level, then they're going to go advocate for whatever their management or HR, whoever they need to work through to get something. And if their hands are tied and they can't, they'll tell you. But again, you won't get to that point unless you have that ability to have the conversation.
I think that's too where, doing your due diligence before, but both before applying, but also during the recruitment process, really understanding what's expected. How is your company or potential company adapting during COVID? What is the work-life balance? What is the typical day in the life? Sort of really understanding that, and also understanding truly the culture. What are the expectations? What is your manager's management style? Are they a more, sort of tactical, hands-on sort of player coach? Are they more someone who lets you, sort of watches from a distance? What is their style in terms of giving feedback? How often do they like to give feedback? It's hard during the recruitment process because you always feel like you have to sort of present, yourself to the best, which you need to do, but you also need to, make sure that the company is presenting itself, well as well, and really understanding from them, what is it really like to take this particular role at this particular time in the company, and then what is the, also the potential future growth path as well. And I think, as Jorge said, coming to those conversations armed with data points, armed with, testimonials, with appraisals from colleagues, with success, it's only going to empower you further. The last piece of this, also sort of understanding sort of where the times are. It's a difficult time for a lot of companies. So sometimes they may want to recognize you and they may feel like you are deserving of a salary increase or a bonus, but they may just not have it sort of within their budget. But again, if you come to that conversation with your data points, with your track record of success, that can help you and your manager sort of align on, okay, so how do we get to that point in the future? Or what's another way for the company to recognize your work?
Absolutely. Well, that's about all the time we have for questions tonight. So thank you both. I did want to give the two of you an opportunity to provide, kind of one final thought if you had it. So if you've got one thing that kind of succinctly wraps up connecting the dots for human resources, go right ahead.
Putting us on the spot, Jeremiah. Let's see. I mean, I think with HR, like we're here to partner with you. We're here to set you up for success, and we want to see you successful. And nothing makes us more happier and content with our respective jobs and professions than seeing you be successful.
I 100% agree with that. What I would say is, if there's the right kind of partnership happening between HR and your leadership, the goal is always to try and advance the company through its people. And that means that if you're showing up on that short list of people that are being considered for higher positions, grooming, development, and so on, then HR really is your advocate in that process. And so, making sure that you're leveraging all the capabilities, and even connecting and making relationships with the people, because I can tell you that a lot of times manager wants to talk with someone about their team, and so they're going to their HR business partner and saying, hey, I got this team, this person's really great, I want to make sure that they're compensated appropriately, I want to get them ready for this next job. Connecting with HR and having some relationship gives HR that other perspective of seeing you, and that can help you, and they can also provide guidance and so on for you in that process. So there's a lot there, but hopefully this was all helpful.
No, that was excellent. So again, thank you both for the presentation and answering everyone's questions. A big round of virtual applause to the two of you. Thank you for serving with alumni relations and being connected alumni. And thank you to everyone that joined us this evening. It was excellent to see so many people come out and participate in this series. Just so you all are aware, our next presentation in the series is 2 weeks from today. We have another National Alumni Board member presenting, Joe Shields, and Gold Board alumnus Errol Atak will be talking about financial planning on September 30th. Thank you to both James and Jorge, and thank you to everyone for coming out. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.